All right, good morning, people. Happy Friday. Bob here, back once again, breaking down some Bitcoin. We are getting right down to it. Pretty straightforward at this point. The concept is always that you assume that you stay in a pattern until it officially breaks the pattern. And as of right now, we've yet to break this trend line here, at least on the daily. I mean, we've put in some, like here, this day right here, we put in some effort up above here that lasted for several hours. Here we got a little bit of work yesterday, right up to the line. Really, I kind of figured we might actually get a little closer to 24/7 than we did, which I suppose still can't be ruled out that maybe this thing reverses and slams down and then reverses again. Tough to say, but you see this little guy up here, this little tag indicates a bearish divergence. And again, you don't always get them, and you still get some downside, right? Or upside, depending. Like here, you got the bearish divergence still went up to the upside. So, it's not necessarily a death sentence or anything, but, this is a spot where I would look at and say, all right, well, the last two times it happened, it led to downside moves. What's the likelihood that this one does not? And at least at the moment, I'd say it's fairly likely that it will lead to some downside. Now, the question becomes, are we just going to come down here and tap and then take off again for the weekend so we can get this good weekend in? If it comes and taps down here, the question becomes, what does that correlate to on here? Does it come all the way down to here, 23,000 basically? Are we coming back to here, 22.6? Do we have to come all the way back down to 21.9 to get that blast off? That becomes the question. And what you'll see is that, you have to be watching it, as closely as I do, kind of almost all day style, in order to be able to see these things sometimes. But when the market starts to flip a little bullish and the sentiment flips with it, what ends up happening is you get these downside wicks that basically are there to either wipe out over-leveraged longs, or at least just to put some indecision in the market. The more times that happens, and the more you get stopped out of a trade, you're just less likely to make it. So, it's one of a few things that potentially could be in play as far as that part goes. But you do get those. And yesterday, we were sitting here in this video and we were looking at the 4 hour. So actually, let's just go ahead and jump on over to the 4 hour. But yeah, I mean, again, just looking at the daily, I'd say anything down to 21.9 would be a feasibility. Anything below that, I mean, if it just dumped all the way through this line, that would be ugly, obviously. So I don't think that that's a realistic scenario. But I think this is probably the most realistic right here, 22.6-ish, 22.5. And then, at some point this weekend, I truly believe that we end up here. Whether or not that ends up being true is another story. I mean, right now, kind of look at this way. Parabola's put in 5 bases, and the 5th base is the one that actually dumps out. So here's 1, 2, 3. Base 4 is being constructed right now, essentially, assuming this is a valid parabola, which it certainly looks like it based on the way that the price bounced off here. But let's assume that this is going to be the fourth base. The 4th base tends to be the one that, again, is the precursor. You get this final push and then the dump that comes afterwards. So ideally, this would actually be this would be the start of the 3rd base, most ideally. So like 1, 2, then we start 3. The move that comes out of the 3rd base is typically the one that is the largest. So that's where we're going to hope that this is actually the 3rd base. But I do think, based on this, 1, 2, we've already got a 3rd base. This probably is the 4th. And again, it may be a very shallow base, which will be good. And then we'll get a pop. And then again, it will probably drop off. And who knows if it happens here. It's going to happen. And, if we had some sort of miracle move, again, this $34,000 range is right there. That would be like the miracle move, I'll call it. Totally unexpected if it happened, and if it did, I'd just blow your mind kind of thing. So, but again, we've got this bearish divergence right now. Is it going to lead to some massive downside? That's what we're going to find out here real soon over the weekend. But again, let's get out of this daily chart real quick. Let's go ahead and get right on over to the 4-hour. Now, this, again, you're in the pattern until you're not, right? That's the general concept. Well, right now, it's tough to discern, the current pattern that's really in play here as far as this guy. But this pattern is very obvious at this point, right? We filled this thing out significantly at this point. This pattern is obviously very valid, and we've broken out of it a few times now, but we can't hold it. Haven't been able to break out and maintain the breakout of that pattern. So, generally speaking, I would expect this thing to start working its way back down, probably similar to what we did over here, right? We had this nice rise, ran into the wall, started this flagging situation here. Same kind of idea, except obviously you can see the price action looks very different than it did over here, right? This was probably a little more conventional rise here, where you kind of come in, you put in higher lows, not vastly higher, but this one here has just been fairly parabolic. It's still tough to think that 48, 72 hours ago, whatever, is down here at 20,700, and all of a sudden last night it hit 24.4. So pretty impressive work out of Bitcoin there and the bulls. And again, it's just a matter now is what are we putting together here? If this thing is an expanding, broadening wedge, or a rising, broadening wedge, and kind of could be an accumulation funnel of sorts. It'd be a vertical accumulation, obviously, and same concept. Let's say it was base 1, base 2, base 3. So this next move off of here, assuming that we can look at this realistically, and it is what I'm seeing, then awesome. We've got another push that's going to come and bring this thing up to the top of this band again, maybe come back down, tap here. So I mean, we still got some chances here to really put in some work this weekend. Just a matter of what the market's going to give us. We've talked about this before relatively recently as well. The fact that Bitcoin, since April, somewhere in there, might have even been like January, but Bitcoin has only been above, on the 4-hour chart, Bitcoin has only spent about a week above the 200 simple moving average right up until July 15th when it broke above it again and held it. Again, I could show you. I mean, here was the only time we've been above it recently. This was from June 5th until June 6th, and then June 6th it lost it again. June 7th it reclaimed it, and then it's basically been below it since June 7th again. The last time we were above it was back here April 10th. So yeah, I mean, it's been, again, in the last 3 plus months, we had spent only a couple of days above that line. Now finally we've got several days above it, almost 2 weeks at this point. The question becomes, though, does Bitcoin need to come back down here and retest it now, or can it go ahead and continue to make the upward push? I can make the argument that at the very least we come back down to this level and tap here at this 22.6 level. And again, the logic there would be that at least that would get us the support of the 21 simple potentially on the 4-hour chart. So you catch this thing and then make another push to the upside. Then the only question I have would be, does that thing then form an obvious head and shoulder? If it would get stopped out here at about 23.5-ish again, that would probably end up being a head and shoulder, and then we do come back down to test this guy out. So, we've got one of two ways I could see this weekend playing out. And with any luck, it all involves altcoins doing their thing, but we're either coming back down here returning up here and putting in, just this very small kind of range over the weekend, say like 22.5 to 23.5, 23.7. That's a potential range that we could just be sitting in all weekend for the most part, if all of this stuff doesn't work out to our benefit, which right now, to be honest, it doesn't look like it would want to. But what we do have going for us on the 4 hour is that we are up here in bullish control territory. And until that's lost, I mean, we could assume that it will stay bullish control. You had this real nice bounce here off this bullish area. Let's see if we can get another nice bounce here. And again, that would correspond with this thing reversing course and heading back up to the top of this. And then again, if we can just simply maintain that through the weekend, we probably do hit close to 27K. And I could see it being one of those things where it's maybe the first move that Bitcoin makes right out the gate on Sunday night, right after 8 o'clock. Maybe it lands on a good support level and then just hammers its way up to 27, 28 from there. We'll see. We'll see. Again, it's, can only tell you what I basically see here, and as of right now, we're in bullish control. So let's see if we can stay there. That'll be the key to this weekend being what we typically would expect it to look like. On the hourly right now, again, I think it's fairly obvious that this thing seems to be forming out a pretty reasonable head and shoulder pattern. Already lost to 21, which we hadn't lost since, we've been above it since the 26th of July and just been bouncing off the 21. We finally lost it right here. On the hourly chart. So now got to find support here. Do we come all the way back down and tap the 200 and then recover up to here? Like I said, tough to say at the moment, but that's what we're looking at as far as the potential. So again, I still think that the feasibility is it could work its way all the way back down here. Really was hopeful last night that we would actually see this thing pop all the way up to the 702. Didn't happen. We did set a slightly higher high than over here, so I would say that even though we didn't necessarily get a close that was, this is a wick that went above it, but it's still a higher high than over here. So I would say that we don't necessarily have to return to this low, that in fact we do still have an intact uptrend. Now it's just a matter of, recovery after a little bit of a retracement here. Now, what would be nice is if it just doesn't lose this level, right? It comes down, maybe taps this 50 simple at 23.2 or wicks down through here. And then it, by the time the hourly candle closes, it closes right up here and then pushes up the way. We're going to see. This is not really what you wanted to see here. This, coming out of oversold territory and then just getting an outright rejection here. That's not really what you wanted to see if you wanted upside continuation. But same concept here. If this thing comes down and then reverses course above the 40 level, then at least it stays in neutral territory for now. It doesn't go into bear control. And as long as we can stay out of bear control, this thing probably does recover fairly quickly. So that would be the ideal scenario. So again, I did say, I was talking to Matt yesterday, and I think that maybe one thing that I had initially overlooked in terms of how quickly I think we're going to hit this 27K number would be the fact that we've really only retested this 24K region once prior to the last 24 hours. Typically, you're going to need to see maybe like 3 attempts before it actually happens and before you actually break through. So now, again, I just look at this and I say, all right, this level's got to hold right here, and then the next attempt we make at it should break through it. Now it's just a matter of will it do it. And again, I think realistically too, this is a level that could hold up right here. And give us another push to the upside, but until we actually see it happen, I can't say that with any certainty, obviously. So that's really all we're waiting on, just a little confirmation here. Right now, you'd want to be short right here just because you're at the top of this pattern. It's clear that it's not really breaking out of the pattern. I mean, again, depending on where you put that line, but you'd really want to be in a position where you'd be short up until it finds some support again. Then you could, cancel that out or flip long. But yeah, right here, this could have some little bit of a danger zone to it, if you will. So, and you can even see, just kind of looking at this chart, like you had this kind of rounding of the top here, and then finally it blasted off, and you could just see where it's just been, even though the price has been going up, this is actually in a slight downtrend, which, again, and this is kind of where the market starts to get kind of counterintuitive, and it's when you're stuck in bear mode for months on end, and you see the way the chart reacts in bear mode, sometimes it reacts very differently in bull mode. And what I mean by that is simply the fact that, again, this stuff right here was actually heading upwards, these prices, but the RSI was heading downward. Now, what eventually happens here is, as this continues to head downward, eventually you get this bearish divergence on the smaller time frames, and you get these nasty moves, which you're seeing there. I still hold a bullish outlook for the weekend at the moment, but again, I think that, I believe this was last Thursday, somewhere in here, and yet we ended up with a fairly poor weekend out of it. Possible that we do it again this weekend? Sure. And then maybe it's actually into the beginning of next week that we see the positive movement again. But, again, that's really all I'm looking for. So possible head and shoulder forming here. Possible that we've got a ascending, broadening wedge kind of forming right here that, again, on the, and I'll just show you this real quick, on the RSI, it's much more like a descending, broadening wedge, which is a pattern that will eventually break out to the upside. That's a bullish pattern, assuming this thing would, in fact, be forming a descending, broadening wedge, and it's not just, a straight drop. Then this thing eventually would break out. And in fact, right here, at some point in the next few hours, this thing could reverse course and start pushing back up there. And again, the same thing corresponds with the price action here. We're seeing it. It's down. But being that this was a rising pattern that is forming right here, it's possible it's going to start bouncing right here and start making the push up to this level, this level potentially. But yeah, this 24,869 is going to be the number that I've got, in my mind as far as the target. Maybe even today. I mean, that would be the number I'd like to see. But the 618 and the 702 are also the ones that are most likely to lead to hard rejections. So we're just going to have to see what comes out of this. But, really that's all I got for you guys today. We appreciate you as always. Looking forward to catching up next week. Fingers crossed that this week ends up being a super positive one. And then we will catch up talking about the excitement from the weekend on Monday.